Okay, I think we are live.
Okay, we are live. Thanks, Stu. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adam Wilson, and first I'd like to, commence this meeting on Monday, February 1st at 1:31 p.m. And I just wanted to make some brief introductory comments for myself, and so that everybody gets familiar with who I am in my new role. As many of you know, through Keen's original email, I've been brought on as a consultant to help shepherd this proposal through the process. And just quick way of background to myself, over the last 17 years, I've worked for Supervisor Diane Jacob as her land use advisor, and I'm excited for this new opportunity to transfer over my expertise and experiences from that position into this new role. My personal goal is pretty simple. It's to kind of just establish a direct relationship with each party, which is why I reached out to Sandy, Tom, and Jack before this meeting to kind of just get that initial introductions to the main participants of this proposal. I'm a big firm believer that communication is everything, and having an open, honest, direct, and transparent line of communication is typical for a recipe for success. And as I pointed out to some of them, many of you know that Supervisor Jacob was instrumental in consolidating the fire services in this region over the last couple of decades. And I was a part of many of those efforts. And I see a lot of commonalities between that and the efforts that are being worked on today. So my hope is to draw from those experiences and help apply them here, and to appease all parties for an end game that's successful and holistic for the region in its entirety. So with that said, I'm pleased to be a part of this, and I'll be helped by facilitating these meetings going forward and getting the most out of the ad hoc committee and their tasks. And I will be assisting LAFCO in the administrative review of these two complex proposals. And I'd also like to note, just by bringing me on, it allows the opportunity to free up Keen and the Commission Council to kind of just independently sit on the sidelines and listen and take notes and be a part of the process from a more simplistic point of view. So with that, I'd like to get the meeting started, and unless anybody has any questions for me. Okay, perfect. So we'll move on to the roll call, and I'll ask Erica to call the order.
Okay, so roll call for Rainbow Fallbrook Ad Hoc Committee meeting for today at 1:30. I'm gonna have Brian Albright.
Here.
Jack Beebe.
I'm here.
David Sherashore.
Here.
Gary Croucher.
I am here.
Rachel Cortez.
I see her.
Rachel. You're here. Thank you. Nick Canettis.
Here.
Tom Kennedy.
Here.
Sandy Curl.
Here.
Kim Thorner.
Here.
Is Lydia Romero on the line yet? Okay, she said she will be joining, so I will make note of when she arrives. So ends roll call.
And that gives us a quorum?
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
There's a virtual quorum, yes.
Perfect. Virtual quorum it is. And just also like to point out for the record too that Keen, Robert Berry, and Holly are present on the call as well. Perfect. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is the agenda review. Just real quick and brief. We're basically going to be checking in with Robert on two items. He will first give us the status on the proposal proceedings, as well as the separate but related municipal service review involving the Rainbow Fallbrook community. And after we check in with Robert, then we'll pivot to the heart of the agenda, which will be letting Dr. Michael Hanneman have the floor and engaging with him and addressing two of the three assigned topics that the committee previously tagged And then we'll be discussing perhaps maybe instituting a quiet period so Dr. Hammond can do his analysis and review, and we can proceed forward with the application. So that's the long and short of the agenda review, and we'll move on to the business items, which is the first one is the approval of the action minutes for the December 7th, 2020 meeting.
I move approval. Oh, second.
Okay, we've got a mover
Motion
for
by
approval
Jewish Order.
and a second. And Erica, we will need a roll call for that.
Okay, the roll call for the minutes for item 5A, Kim Thorner,
Yes.
Sandy Curl,
Yes.
Tom Kennedy,
Yes.
Nick Canettis,
Yes.
Rachel Cortez. Yes. Gary Croucher,
Yes.
David Cherishore,
Yes.
Jack Beebe,
Yes.
Brian Albright.
Yes.
Okay, and Lydia Romero is still absent. So there is right now 9 in favor with 0 opposed. The motion passes.
Perfect. That passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move on to item 5B, which is the processing update for the reorganization proposals. So I will now lend it over to Chief Policy Analyst Robert Berry on the status of the reorganization proposals filed by Fallbrook and Rainbow.
Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see everyone again. As Adam said, I'm going to give just a brief overview on the status of the reorganizations and then talk about the MSR a little bit. Both of these are going on in parallel. We have received communication from the Water Authority highlighting the need to synchronize those two actions, the processing of the two individual reorganization proposals, as well as the Fallbrook Region Municipal Service Review, which is one of the sub-regional service reviews we're doing across the county as part of our mandated 5-year cycle to review the adopted spheres of influence in the county for all cities and districts, including Fallbrook and Rainbow. The Fallbrook Region MSR I'll talk a little bit more about, but as your committee is aware, we have two separate proposals, both initiated by resolution of the individual districts, Fallbrook PUD, Rainbow MWD, for a reorganization involving detachment from the Water Authority and concurrent annexation to Eastern. So all of the LAFCO proposals go through a very similar process. The main difference is really obviously the subject matter, the issues at hand, and any other needed information that the commission would have before it would proceed to a hearing. So this proposal has been received, it's been acknowledged, it's been distributed for comment also to the assessor and the auditor's office. Both the assessor and auditors have finished their roles statutorily in terms of what they're required to do for the proposals. The auditors' property tax exchange discussions have evolved to discussions with County Council, Planning and Development Services Department, as well as LAFCO staff and LAFCO Council. We've had a couple conversations with Planning and Development staff. Under Board Policy 45, the Planning Department is responsible, excuse me, for processing property tax exchange proposals under the county's responsibilities under the Revenue and Tax Code. So that process for the property tax starts at the end of the auditor's report, where they identify all of the affected property taxes and identify whether any master agreements are available that could apply. The planning department then takes that information and either applies that master agreement, which is a pre-existing exchange agreement that governs certain proposals. And what that does is avoid having to docket every single proposal for a Board of Supervisors action where they're routine. So this obviously is not a routine proposal, but the mechanics of the proposal fall under those routine parameters. So the consideration right now is whether the pre-existing master enterprise resolution agreement that governs property tax exchanges for annexations, detachments from enterprise districts like water, sewer districts would apply in this case, or whether the Board of Supervisors would need to take a specific action on the property tax exchange. So from the outside looking in, the components of the proposal do qualify for this master agreement in terms of the affected agencies or enterprise agreements or enterprise agencies. And there's not a specific request for an exchange of property taxes. However, given the circumstances and given the scrutiny as well as the potential applicability of the County Water Authority Act for continuation of payments for the provisions that are specified for exclusion of agencies from the Water Authority, that question still remains unopened in terms of whether there is a need for a continued assessment beyond this proposal, if it were to be approved, to facilitate that type of Water Authority continuing payment, or whether that would be needed given the circumstances. We've not gotten to a conclusion on that discussion yet, but the basic understanding is that if the county did agree that the master agreement applies to this circumstance, all it would do would basically be contingent on LAFCO approval and then be contingent on any modifications that the commission may make. So what it is more a procedural aspect to move forward. And the question is whether they need to take a specific action by the Board of Supervisors. We've also had some discussions with Property Tax Services Division of the Auditor's Department, which handles the exchange of property taxes at the basic level in terms of the tax rate area changes and actually implementing those changes after an approved jurisdictional change. The question to Property Tax Services was, if there is no exchange of property taxes, what happens to the existing allocation that's designated for the Water Authority? Would that, after a detachment, be able to be continued, or would that be something that would be precluded with a detachment and the assessment no longer occurring? The other question was, if there is not a specific negotiated exchange that designates an exchange of taxes, what happens to that allocation? Does it simply by default go to the annexing agency? Again, hypothetically, if this proposal is approved. The answer to that is that yes, is that under the 1%, that allocation going to the Water Authority is pre-designated for wholesale water services. So if there's a jurisdictional change that would affect those services with a seceding receiving agency taking up those responsibilities, presumably those taxes would then transfer to that receiving agency because they are pre-existing under the Prop 13 1% allocation. The only way that they would not transfer is if there was a specific action made by the county, and then that would have to be done with a public hearing, et cetera, with its own justifications. So the last conversation that Holly and I had with the county was they were going to take under consideration those thoughts and come back with us with a written confirmation as to the applicability of the master agreement or the need for a negotiated exchange. But to be clear, under a negotiated exchange, the only subject taxes would be the taxes going to the Water Authority. So even if they were to have a negotiated exchange, presumably they would simply just designate that those taxes would go to the annexing agency. And under the master agreement, it doesn't seem that that specific action is necessary. So we're going to wait to hear back from County Council and Planning and Development Services for a formal response, and we'll convey that back to the committee as soon as we're aware of it. The remainder of the proposal processing is really tied up in what we're doing here in many ways, because of Dr. Hanneman's work and the specifics on water rates, water supply, et cetera. Those are going to inform the project level discussions and the project level review on these proposals. These are also global discussions in terms of the municipal service review scope and the applicability on some of those conclusions or most of those conclusions on the service review and the service review's determinations. So I do think that there is a tie-in with Dr. Hanneman's work that will inform both aspects. But with the proposals, they're deemed incomplete until this process is completed to a point of satisfaction where we're going to move forward to a commission hearing. So the proposals themselves remain somewhat static in that we're waiting for the property tax exchange and then continuation of our discussions with this group. And I imagine there'll be some synchronization in terms of the timing, again, depending on how quickly we progress through these issues on a global and a project level basis. So that's basically my status update for the proposals, unless anybody has any questions about that. And then I'll go on to the MSR. Adam?
Yep, Tom, I think you're raising your hand. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Very, very complete description there. Now, if I understand this correctly, if the circumstance were to occur that it needed to go to the supervisors for determination of whether to transfer the part of the 1% up to the receiving agency, the question in front of the supervisors would just be, should we transfer that 1% or not transfer that 1%, and nothing on the other aspects of the proposals, correct?
I don't even know that it would get to that part as much as it would simply acknowledge what the auditor had done to identify the affected property taxes, and the acknowledgement that that transfer would occur based on the transfer of services and be contingent on LAFCO approval. So I think that the real key issue is that whatever the board would adopt, whether it would be the master agreement or a negotiated exchange, it would be preliminary because it would be based on LAFCO approval and only would be applied in that context. So they would not get into any other aspects of the proposal whatsoever. It would simply be the revenue and tax code requirements for their responsibility to make the determination.
So what sort of time frame are you thinking about on this process wrapping up?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew.
Me too. That's why I asked.
Well, again, given the concerns of the larger issues with overall water supply reliability rates, the implications on the water authority, et cetera, with the detachments, I would have to say that the bulk of the work of this committee is going to have to be completed before either of those proposals, I think, are ready for consideration by the commission. Now, I think Keen could weigh in better on this in terms of the long-term perspective. But for the proposals at this point, we're riding on the information that Dr. Hanneman is working on at the project level as well as the global level comprehensively for the MSR. So unless there's a better way to separate those two for the proposals to move separately from the MSR, it's very difficult, I think, to try to give a firm timeline at this point without being speculative.
Is there anybody else that has a question for Robert or the commission?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Apparently my Siri's talking to me. She wants to participate.
Here he has a question.
If and anybody can jump in as I'm going over, we can segue.
I want to hear more from Siri. Hold on.
We can segue to the MSR if you like. I think it's a similar discussion as far as we've engaged the MSR. What I've been working with personally is information gathering and trying to create the structure of the report. There is going to be a lot of outreach with the affected agencies this month to come up with an administrative draft that would be sufficient enough for distribution, not only to your committee, but also to the affected agencies prior to bringing it to the commission in a draft form for discussion. But again, given the need to synchronize the proposals and their review with the MSR, I do think that there will be some time as Dr. Hanneman is working through those issues to flesh out the MSR too. So my best guess is that we would have a good structure for an administrative draft to be able to be available hopefully by our next ad hoc meeting, if not prior. But in terms of the specific timing on that, it's somewhat fluid in relation to, again, the issues that we're all talking about and how that is going to affect the determinations for the MSR. As far as the services and the background data, et cetera, that's basically where the work has been going into to create that document. And again, I'll be reaching out to each of the agencies individually during this month to make sure I have my information correct and get any other details that I'll need to bring an administrative draft back to you. But again, I'm able to answer questions about that process or where it is at this point. If anybody has specific questions, I imagine we'll be talking much more in detail in the next ad hoc meetings in terms of the MSRs and the potential determinations and a working administrative draft that can be distributed. Yes.
I have a question, Adam. Thanks, Robert, for the update on that. Typically I'm not in any big hurry to get our MSR. That's not, a pressing item generally. As we do have, community groups that are looking for, activation of certain powers as part of, and we sort of tied it to our MSR process. So, and maybe it's a separate discussion we can have, but I know that, dragging that out will become a concern for those groups. And I know, like we did this morning, MSRs a lot of times raise issues, but they don't necessarily solve all the issues. We have in the past with MSRs sort of carved out issues that need to be resolved, and fundamentally, scope of services and the services we're going to provide, and our sphere and other things, I doubt will change depending on what happens with the the detachment proposal. So it's just something, that's my only concern with delaying the MSR is that activation of those powers and sort of the impact on the community groups that are looking to get support for activities.
They've been in touch with me, and I've been in communication with them regarding the status and what's going on. Just for the benefit of the committee, we have an additional proposal from Fallbrook PUD to activate their latent powers for park and recreation services. That obviously is separate from what these proposals are involved. However, it's a similar circumstance in the sense that we would need to activate that service and potentially establish a sphere for it in the same context as what we would do an MSR for. So there may be some discussion, I think, in the future as to whether that proposal may be able to be separated from this, because those issues are really not the same at all. But the activation of the latent power for park services would be to assume services, if I understand correctly, that are currently being provided. And it's just that the PUD has park and rec services available to it, but would need to come to LAFCO to have it activated to take over those services. So there is a timing issue that's not really related to Dr. Hanneman's work at all. So that may be something that we could consider at a future point for separation.
And as long as they're calling you and not me, then that's fine. I'll get them to you when they're asking timing.
Go ahead. Anybody can send anybody my info. Please do. I would rather talk to them directly. But I really don't have anything more than that on the MSR, the proposals. But again, I'm available if anyone has questions or needs information.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for the updates on both of those items. Appreciate it. And before we move on, I just want to check with Erica for the administrative record if there, I know that both of those items were informational, but just want to double check if there was any members of the public participating on the call and or any members of the public that provided any e-comments on the items. I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
I have not received any comments as of yet.
Okay, perfect. We will move on. Thank you, Robert. The next item of business will be item 5D, and we will now punt it over to consultant Michael Hanneman on the ongoing analysis requested by the committee as a part of the administrative review of the reorganization proposals. And this will include discussion and feedback on key questions and related assumptions developed by the consultant in proceeding and addressing 2 of the 3 signed topics: water rate impacts and potential exit fees. And I know a part of today's agenda, Dr. Hanneman provided some written questions that he was hoping that your agencies and members could provide either sources to or additional information on that he's requested to help his analysis and review. So I will kick it over to Dr. Hanneman, and we can have his report, and then we can have discussion after that.
Good afternoon, everybody, and Happy New Year. So as Adam has said, and as you have seen, I developed a set of, I think it's 8 questions. So just to back up, I have been reading, received the draft of the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan from San Diego and information from Eastern MWD. Actually, I haven't received anything from Fallbrook-Rainbow, and I realize you're working on it, but if you could make available at a time that's convenient for you, sort of what you have. Obviously, I've seen everybody's 2015 Urban Water Management Plans. The Urban Water Management Plans are informative, but there's a number of issues that they don't really talk about. They don't talk about finance or rates. I mean, they're not required to do that. And they don't describe in full detail sort of decision-making procedures. And so I put together this list of questions that you have before you, for which I'd like to get information. I have ideas of sources, but they're sort of those ideas are sort of hit or miss. And so I thought the best way to proceed was to share these questions with you and have you guide me. And you're very welcome to just give me the titles or web links to reports. I can download them myself. Or you can write a memo with the information. I don't want to make extra work for you, but it's more, I wanted you to point me really to the relevant documents that would best address those questions. And so that was my motivation. Now, they're actually relevant for all 3 tasks that I've been assigned, but they deal more with the first and third tasks, the water rate impacts and the possibility of a departure fee. And that's because the questions touch more on, financing, rate making, and those aspects. So that's what I had in mind to put this before you. We'll fix we'll set a time period that's convenient for you. And then I was, depending upon the time period, what I was thinking, and I'm absolutely open to other suggestions, is that I then have a quiet period, say, of the next 2 months. So at the beginning of April, at whatever time is convenient, I'd report back. Now, it's very likely that I'll have figured some things out, but I'll have other questions or ideas that I want to run by you. So I won't have completed my analysis by the beginning of April, but I will be in some sense midway, or at least in the process of that analysis. And what I'd like to do then is, at that time, is report on the conclusions I'm leaning towards and run them by you so I can get feedback, and also identify issues that I'm still thinking about and haven't formed a conclusion, and also identify areas where I'd need some information in order to form a conclusion. So that's how I was thinking of moving forward, if that works for you. So that's what I wanted. That's the suggestion I wanted to put before you.
Okay, does any members of the committee have any questions or concerns or comments to the questions or the process? David?
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Hahnemann again. And it is great to have an experienced and knowledgeable consultant working for LAFCO who has a good understanding of water issues. One thing that we want to make sure of is that Dr. Hahnemann gets access to all the critical facts that he will need to make an accurate report. And to do this, we think it's very important that he meet, even if only remotely, with all the applicable agency staffs and agency consultants and be able to talk to them about the relevant issues from the perspective of San Diego County water suppliers. For example, you will need to meet with the Water Authority and MWD staff to understand how the Water Authority currently gets water from MWD and how our QSA water is not the same, but significantly different than MWD imported water supplies. You will also have to have a full understanding of MWD's rates and what costs are coming for MWD, but which are not accounted for in its 10-year rate model. It does not have a long-term finance plan beyond the 10-year horizon. You should also meet with Water Authority, Fallbrook, and Rainbow staff to get a proper understanding of their regional water systems, including the type of capital projects needs or not for the two agencies to change over from Water Authority to Eastern. You'll need to meet with the Water Authority and Eastern staff to compare services provided by both agencies. You will need to meet with Water Authority finance staff to understand the obligations that the Water Authority incurred to meet the baseload water demands of Rainbow and Fallbrook customers, and what terms would be required on an exit so other member agencies are not harmed. You should also meet with the Delta Water Master to understand the potential impacts on the Bay Delta of Fallbrook and Rainbow, switching from local water supplies back onto imported Bay Delta water from MWD. You will need to meet with board members of Eastern to understand more fully how the proposed governance would work and any potential impacts on Eastern customers. We would hope that this would be a transparent process where all affected agencies can participate so that Dr. Hahnemann hears from all sides and sees where there are agreements and where there are differences that need to be investigated. This will be a major task, and we certainly look forward to working with Dr. Hahnemann and his team to accomplish the necessary work. And I would ask that this process take place coincident with the 30-day quiet period. I take that to mean that we are not bombarding him with information, but rather it's his turn to seek information from all the relevant agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think Sandy, you have your hand up as well. Do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Hahnemann, really appreciate the questions that you've outlined, and really you clearly seeking to be thorough and make sure that you have a clear understanding of the information. I agree with you about having a response deadline for these questions. And I might suggest a very short window for any further response if it appears there needs to be any clarification of information provided that everyone would benefit from, and then go into that quiet period. On the exit fee issue, I wanted to say that we assume you'll be looking at the financial effects of detachment and what amounts LAFCO could, if it decided to do so, impose as an exit fee condition should detachment be approved. And that it would not go into the legal options or the legal issues, that would be left to the LAFCO attorneys based on background and ability to address that issue. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified. Thank you.
Let me just say, I'm very much aware of two things, that there are legal issues and that I'm not a lawyer and have no competence to address them. And so I'm very aware of the importance to focus on economic and financial issues where I have knowledge and experience, but to not get into legal issues. But instead leave those to Holly and her colleagues working for LAFCO.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other members of the committee that have questions? Thomas, your hand, and then we'll go with you, Jack, next.
All right, thank you. And well, I appreciate Dr. Hanneman's reluctance to get into legal issues. It's can be a deep hole, but I would hope that LAFCO staff and council would help frame the various statutes in a layperson's manner, where it does describe both within the County Water Authority Act and CKH, what the relevant processes should be. And just for everyone's edification, the terms departure fee and exit fee don't exist in either of those statutes. So this is kind of a different sort of a conditions that LAFCO might impose is one thing, but there's no mandate to have a fee to leave outside of what's in the statutes.
Thanks, Tom. Jack?
Yeah, just to note, thanks, Dr. Hanneman, for giving that background and kind of laying out some of your thoughts. Just to sort of talk this through too, from the urban water management plan side, ours typically tail the wholesalers. So, we wait and see what their projections are, usually develop ours from their projections. This year, we are independently taking a look at our projections as well, but that process is ongoing. So, we did send you a short summary that just sort of highlights what we expect to go into our urban water management plan. That's going to get refined over the next several months, but we won't have a draft ready, with all the text and other information for, I would suspect, a couple months or so, just because of how the process plays out. The other thing is with the questions, as you might gauge by looking at all the information you've read so far, I suspect you're going to get two very different answers. And there is going to need to be a little bit of time for I think us to get some of that information also, because it's a little more challenging for us to dig out some of those things. But you will likely get two different answers, though. I'm confident you'll be able to work your way through it, and then you will be able to decide who you need to speak to and who you don't. And I think that's sort of my opinion on the idea of having to talk to everyone. I think once we give you the information, then it's going to be your decision where you need more information and where you don't.
I agree. And let me say, I do appreciate the kind of awkwardness of the timing of the urban water management plan. And so, of course, I think all the water agencies in California are sort of in process, and you won't have completed plans. And so that's fine. Sort of the information that you have now, if you share it, and most of you have, I appreciate that. And, as we move forward, if there's some forecast or some other information from the urban water management plan, looking forward over the next, whatever it is, 20, 25 years, if there's some information that is very important, I'll use the information I have on a tentative basis and make that clear to everybody. And then we can sort of figure out how to firm up the number and how to proceed. But I realize you're all busy with urban water management plans, so it's like you don't need me taking up your time right now. And so I want to be respectful of the process for you.
Is there any other members of the committee that have any questions or comments to the discussion? Seeing none. So I guess what I'm hearing is we first need to answer an appropriate timeline and get a consensus of what would be for the member agencies to provide some comments to the sources that Dr. Hanneman is looking for, whether it's links or whatever the case may be, and any other additional information that may be warranted to the questions. And so I thought I heard a 2-week time period to maybe get some responses to Dr. Hanneman. And if there's consensus to that and no objections, I see a couple of people nodding their head. Maybe we set a 2-week response limit to the questions provided. Okay, I will take that as a bunch of thumbs up and nod heading yes, and a consensus to agree to a 2-week period to have the agencies respond to Dr. Hanneman on the questions provided. With it being February 1st, we'll make the deadline February 15th.
Matt, I'd like to just voice my concern with the amount of information that's requested and lots coming from the Water Authority. I would appreciate if we could look at March 1st.
Is there any objections to having a month response deadline and pushing it to March 1st?
I guess my concern is, this isn't a lot of times new information. I mean, we had an application with a lot of these things, and I think most of this is fairly readily available. So I'm just worried about stretching it. If we're going to wait a month to get our responses, and then the Water Authority wanted a chance to respond to the responses, we just don't want this to take 6 months just to get to the.
Understood. And that was going to be my next question, is if we have a deadline set for the response to these questions. I thought I also heard Sandy having some sort of period of time for some sort of rebuttal. So trying to box this in and have it some sort of structure to it. And so
I would suggest that a little bit longer on the front end and maybe a week for the response.
So how about we split the baby here? How about we do a 3-week period for response to comment to Dr. Hanneman, and we'll set that deadline February 21st, and then a week period for rebuttal, which would be March 1st. Is that a good compromise? Gary, I think you have your hand up. You want to comment?
Yeah, my only comment was that within the process, I know that we're going to go to the proposed quiet time, which is if the doctor needs information, he'll reach out to us. I would say that the only thing is that if anything pertinent comes up during that quiet time, that we're really going to try to leave him alone. But there is something substantial we think that needs to get brought up. That it just be the process that whether it's we reach out to you, Adam, or we reach out to Keen, either or. I think you're the person now taking the lead, that we have the ability to at least reach out to you if need be on something. You could look at it and say, yeah, you know what, I think this absolutely does need to go through, or no, we're going to continue with the silent time. I think that's just a matter of process.
And I agree. And I think that would be my role and responsibility here, to be some sort of conduit to Dr. Hanneman and the agencies. And so during that dark or quiet period, if anybody wants to reach out to me to make sure any type of informational continues to flow and put it into his hands, yeah, I'm more than happy to be the conduit to that. So back to the timeline, 3-week response with 1-week rebuttal. Is there any objections to that? So we will set that as the timeline, as I see a couple of people nodding and no objections. And so for the record, we will make the response period to Dr. Hanneman between now, February 1st and February 21st, and then a 1-week rebuttal period that would end on March 1st, 2021. Is there anything more from Dr. Hanneman, or can we move on?
And this is Gary again, just for tentative purposes, the 3 weeks and then the 1 week. And I think it goes along with what Jack said, is that there's been a lot of the stuff already out there. There shouldn't be any real surprises, but that we have the flexibility that if something during that 3 week period does come out that that you look at and say, yeah, I can understand why we would need more than 1 week to respond to that because of the depth that was brought forth. That we just, although it's all tentative, we keep a little bit of flexibility should we recognize something that needs more time.
And I would want you to have that. I'm not, trying to box you in or impede sort of information in both directions. So I think working with Adam as the conduit is an excellent idea and is helpful for you and helpful for me.
Perfect. Okay, and then do we need discussion on once the comment period for these terminate to discuss some sort of dark period or quiet period so that Dr. Hanneman can do his analysis? I thought I heard 30 days or 60 days. I'm not sure what would be appropriate.
So actually, first of all, there's some flexibility and I want this to work for you. However, April is the last month of teaching. Classes end at ASU on whatever, April 30th or something like that. So in some way, with exams and all other stuff, in some ways doing meeting together at the beginning right at the beginning of May is going to be more convenient than doing it in the middle of April, just because it's a crazy time. If that would, but I want this, to also be satisfactory with you. But April 29th or April 30th there's a major change, and there's major pressure just before then with the students, exams for students, and getting them ready.
Tom, comment?
Yeah, and as has been expressed before, in previous meetings, the longer this goes on, it's just a financial drain on our ratepayers to keep paying the costs associated with the processing of it. So whatever tempo we can put under this is helpful. We also do, when we first were looking at this application, we had dreams of making the fall 2020 election but that was a dream. But when I hear these sorts of things, I'm wondering if we're going to make the June 22 primaries. And so if everybody could, let a little bit of a fire under it, let's get to a decision point on this thing and get it on the ballot, or not, but one way or the other.
Yeah.
Jack, go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. I just need to echo that. We've got, the timeline pressure is obviously going to come from the Fallbrook-Rainbow side as the longer it goes on. On the other end, nothing changes. And so my hope maybe is we could try to, if we're responding in 30 days, at the same time, there's a significant amount of information, as Dr. Hanneman already noted, out there to maybe get things going where he's just waiting to, plug in some of the updated numbers on kind of how he's going to do it, that maybe by, early April, we could have a preliminary, discussion about where things are. I mean, at some point, the rubber's going to hit the road pretty quick, depending on how we move forward on this analysis and how we're moving forward on some of the topics. So that would be my hope, is maybe, by early April, you could at least give us some preliminary input on, what you're seeing going forward, what are you identified as the key issues and some of the general framework. So we're not waiting till, May or June.
So a couple of things. It's not that I'll do nothing till March 1st. I'll be looking at material that comes in, sort of as it comes in. If you wanted to do in the middle of April, fine, if that works better for you. But in the event that stuff is still, coming in through March 1st, I'd like, and I don't know, how much information you'll have, and I don't know how much of it will be new in the sense, for example, of not covered in the open water management plans and other documents. So I think the middle of April would be better than the beginning of April. And let me just mention, one thing I have in mind is this. So as a researcher, I'm used to going around looking for documents. And of course, that's what I would normally do. But I want to be sure, given the importance of this, that I wind up looking at the right documents and not wrong documents. Not only that, but there may be analyses or reports out there that are really not reliable. They may be biased or what. And as you know, if you do a Google search, what you come up with is sort of hit or miss. And so that's where I thought, given the importance of this, it's better that I not go on a fishing expedition of my own, but rather I ask you to point me to the things I should look at. So it's not that I will, be doing not a damn thing between now and March 1st. But I thought this process, which slows things down at the beginning as compared to if you just said, well, you root around in libraries and online and, go with whatever you find. I thought this process is a little, is kind of more solid. That's where I was coming from.
Gary, you have your electronic hand up. Do you still have a comment or?
Yep, mine was.
Go ahead.
This process, the doctor has put out a timeline that he feels comfortable with. He's explained a couple reasons why I think he needs to be the driving force on this timeline. I know Rainbow and Fallbrook would like to have it done yesterday, and within the process, we knew this is a very complex deal between leaving one LAFCO and going to one that's outside in another county, and a lot of the issues that he needs to look at. There's going to be information that's supplied by some that's going to disagree with information being supplied by other. While he's going to need to look at all of that information, he's also going to have to disseminate between what's correct and what's incorrect, what's biased, what's not biased. And so I say we give him the time that he has requested. I'm comfortable with it. That I would rather have him have a little bit of extra time that he's comfortable with his decisions, and we're not pushing him through and saying, okay, we're going to cut off another week here, we'll cut off another week there. I think if he gets done with it early, he'll notify us. If he has additional information, needs more time, he'll notify us. He's given us a date right now. I think we run with it, and that he and the others have questions, we'll reach out to you, Adam, as far as if we have a concern. But I think the timeline he's given for the reasons he's given is more than appropriate.
So let me try to sum this up. Or David, do you have more to add? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Time is always of the essence, and it's of the essence for all of us. We would all like to reach the conclusion of this exercise in a timely manner, but it is also important and incumbent on us to get it right the first time, so that we don't have to revisit this down the road or cause legal issues down the road. So I am respectful of, trying to be respectful of everyone's time, but I also think that we should proceed methodically. And I had suggested that we give Dr. Hahnemann an opportunity to engage in dialogue with all the agencies. Sometimes questions are better answered with that direct contact, all under the auspices of LAFCO, but I've not had a response on that.
Brian, I see your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
I do. My question is related as well to timing, but in a broader sense. I appreciate the comments from all of the committee members on the importance of getting this right. I'm just curious, though, for the broader, more extensive process that involves this committee, do we have a draft timeline, or an expected period of time to reach the end? When we expect this committee's role to have been completed and to have gotten to a point where a decision has been made on reorganization, divestiture, and then moving on to the next steps. I'm just curious if we have that in front of us. Obviously understanding that timelines need to be amended to unforeseen facts, but maybe would like a response as to whether that sort of project lifecycle timeline has been crafted yet.
Kane, I see your hand. Go ahead.
So let me jump in on Brian's question and maybe even David's, just from the staff perspective. And so on the question of timeline, and Robert noted this in his comments on the municipal service review. So we're tying things on multiple levels here. The work of the ad hoc committee admittedly is going to, in my mind, continue at least through the early part of summer, because the real value in the commission's expectation is that you are going to weigh in on Dr. Hanneman's conclusions, right? So Dr. Hanneman's going to offer up some preliminary conclusions on these 3 topics at some point, and it will certainly be after April. I don't know how long after April, but I know it's fair to say you will not see it until then. So I would suggest that summertime would be the period in which the ad hoc committee is going to be asked to weigh in on the reasonableness, not facts or findings, but the reasonableness of Dr. Hanneman's conclusions. At that point, it is possible the ad hoc committee, like a car dealer, will clap its hands and say, okay, we've done our part. We think that the administrative review is now well in hand and staff should proceed with making a recommendation to the commission. You may also determine at that point, again in summer, other issues need to be addressed. So it is a variable. I would offer up that we are, and I hear Jack and Tom, and I'm sensitive to this because I was actually just thinking about writing another email about a deposit, but that's here nor there, about the need to move this along as fast as possible. But this is a complex proposal. So through summer, certainly, I think we'll have a check-in for the ad hoc committee then as to your appetite if you feel like the core issues have been addressed and now LAFCO staff should proceed. And then let me go back to David's comment. So David had asked, well, what about getting some direct one-on-one time with the doctor and having the doctors communicate with a number of different persons? I'll double down on the idea that, as Adam assumes the conduit service, I think we'll have to trust the doctor should decide who he wants to talk to first and foremost, and then go through Adam on that. And I think that's for everyone's benefit. So I think we need to trust the doctor to figure out who he needs to talk to and then work with Adam rather than proactively start scheduling or anticipate meetings. So just my observations.
Kane, fair enough. And when we get to that, I think there's value in that engagement, and I'm willing to. I think it makes sense that we might ask for the doctor's request for that opportunity. In the end game, I think that having had that opportunity and having had that engagement, we're likely to get a better report out on his findings than certainly not having had the opportunity and not having any other engagement with the agencies involved. And again, all under the auspices of LAFCO, to bring some, to bring some structure to it. So that's my thoughts on that.
Any other members have any comments or questions? Nick?
Yeah, just want to follow up on that topic of Dr. Hanneman's follow-up directly with member agencies or their staff or whoever, and as it relates to these questions. So Dr. Hanneman, I'm assuming that these questions were generated from what you've managed to glean from materials and documents you've received thus far. So you were asking as a part of these questions, and I'm coming from Eastern's perspective, and I look at these questions, and there's maybe just a small handful that we might be able to provide some additional input on, and we'll do that. But part of that input might be kind of pointing you in the right direction to a source or whatever. But once you get that information, I'm assuming that may warrant you needing to reach out directly to either one of the member agencies or Eastern or some other sources. Is that what your expectations are?
Let me put it this way. So economists are notorious for making assumptions. And so I can imagine, I have some information, but let's say there's some ambiguity. And so the way it depends. In some cases, it might be very simple. It's like this budget has such and such a category and doesn't break it down. Is there some other document which breaks it down? And that's an example of a follow-up that I'd convey through Adam. But there may be other issues. And what I'm thinking is I do an analysis. Maybe I'd say if X, Y, and Z is true, here's the reasoning, and here's where I'm going. Let's say that, and then that will be part of my reporting back. And you might say, no, actually, X was wrong, and instead of X, it's something else. So then I'd go and I'd take that back and refine the analysis. So some things will be direct questions, but others would be sort of, if this is the case, this is what follows from it. But if that is the case, then this is something different that follows from it. And depending upon that there's two scenarios. One is you say that actually fine, we now decide, or the commission will decide, it will make a judgment as to whether this is the case or that is the case. But there will be other circumstances where these are factual matters, and so you'll say, no, the first one is the case, the second one isn't the case, so fix your analysis. So that's how I see this play out. There'll be some things where I'm just asking for clarification, and I'll do that during the quiet period through Adam. But there'll be some things. So when I come back to you, I'll have writings which are sort of an outline or a sketch or a partial text, writing up what I'm thinking, and I want feedback from you. And some of the feedback will be, as it were, the conclusions I draw from certain facts, but some of the feedback will be the facts or the assumptions are actually wrong, and that's why we think you need to revisit it. So I will be reaching out to you and getting feedback from you really in all these different ways.
Sandy, you have your hand up again? Real quick, you're muted. You might want to, real quick.
Has to happen once a day to all of us, right?
Of course. Go ahead.
Just a clarification on question number 7, which is what are the various charges made by MWD to its member agencies? I think that question should be directly provided by MWD, as whoever answers those questions are accountable for the information. So I hope that that information comes directly from there and not through a third party.
Adam, that's something maybe which you can figure out how to do. I mean, I realize the awkwardness that these are questions addressed to somebody who's not sitting at this table, and I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, I can certainly help facilitate that. And as Sandy pointed out, it's probably most appropriate that it come from them. And so I can be more than a helping hand to try to get some sources or answers to that particular question and issue. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Nick, go ahead again.
Yeah, just follow up on Sandy's comment. So looking through these questions, as I said, there's probably a few here that Eastern may or may not be able to provide some input at. But looking at those, I was thinking along the same lines is that some of these are more appropriately addressed to MWD, and in the spirit of the request for information or sources, I was initially thinking that would be my suggestion is that either the County Water Authority or Easton reach out to MWD to provide that information or point Dr. Hanneman in the right direction at MWD to acquire those. And just bear in mind, we're trying to establish timelines into, getting this information to Dr. Hanneman, and to some degree we'll be committing possibly MWD staff to those timelines, and they're not part of this conversation at this point.
Yeah, I agree with the comment that Adam made, though, him facilitating that, and it's information they have readily available. So I don't see an issue with that.
And that's fine. And I can task myself to do that in the 3-week period for this response to these questions, and make the appropriate contact to MWD and try to get the answers appropriate in that time frame. Anybody else? So not seeing any more hands raised, I guess we'll go back to kind of the delicate balance here of trying to provide some structure, but also the sensitivity of time is of the essence of getting things done. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the front end of a structure, which it sounds like all parties have agreed to. First, the response to the questions be the 3-week period between February 1st and February 21st, a 1-week rebuttal to anything that's been provided. And then March 1st, I guess we could do a 30-day quiet or dark period that Dr. Hanneman could be reviewing the material. If he sees it necessary or fit to reach out to a member agency, he can use me as the conduit to back end that to get any additional information accordingly. And then perhaps we can reconvene this committee on April 1st and check in with Dr. Hanneman on his review. And as he indicated, he might have a better scope and timeline of what he'll be looking at in terms of moving forward to get to the end game finish line, in which Brian asked earlier, to kind of have some sort of end game structure to make this have it not an open-ended process and provide some finality at some point in the midsummer, is what Keen indicated.
Yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
Is everybody in agreement to that? Does that seem appropriate and fair? And
Adam, I just had one. I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure too, obviously if as he gets it, it's not going to be complete and he needs, a couple more weeks.
For sure.
So be it. I don't think we need to meet unless he's ready to meet, and I agreed, he's got to take the time he needs to do it. I'm just trying to make sure everyone understands that, the longer this goes, the more our bills to Keen go.
Yeah.
I get more emails from him asking for another deposit. So we're just, anxious to keep it moving, just because there are others costs that go with that time delay, but also understand he has other commitments and, it'll take him some time to get it right. But I think that timeline sounds good.
Okay. And I was just using the April reconvene so that's more of just a check-in so that we can get an update from Dr. Hanneman on where he is with his analysis and review. And maybe at that point in time, he's got more information in his hand to kind of nail down and lock down a definitive. I think we all understand that his review is not going to be complete by then, but maybe we'll have a better picture come April 1 if we all reconvene and hear back from him. And so that we can kind of maybe hold him to his timeline and his schedule and try to get something complete at some point in the near future of what I heard Keen say is try to get something by summer.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think that concludes this issue. We will keep to those timelines as I indicated. And do we need to check in with Erica? Is there any public comment to this, or is this appropriate, or is there any e-comments?
Yeah, let's do one last check-in.
Yeah, Erica, just check in for one more time for if there's any members of the public participating on the call or any e-comments provided at this point in time.
I haven't received any email comments.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So,
hello.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah. This is again not trying to be neutral here, but wanted to do some checking here. First of all, March 21st is a Sunday. Did you mean March 22nd, or are the comments still due by March 21st? I'm February 21st rather. February 21st is Sunday. Are the comments due?
Okay. Well,
February 21st or the 22nd?
Yeah, Joe, thank you for that note. So yeah, we will clarify that. Today is February 1st. The 3-week period for the comment period would be February 22nd, Monday. And then the 1 week rebuttal would be March 1st. So yeah, that first 3-week period would be February 22nd. And thank you for that clarification, Joe.
All right. And then the first Monday of April would be April 5th. April 1st would be a Thursday. So
we can make that April 5th to keep it consistent with the Mondays.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for pointing
Go
that
ahead and
out.
mute me. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. So 3-week comment period, February 22nd, 1 week rebuttal, March 1st, and then reconvene this committee meeting April 5th. And that will move us on to, which is kind of what we just discussed, the agenda setting for the next meeting. Is there anything to be added other than get an update from Dr. Hanneman and where he's at with his review and kind of getting a more structured timeline on an end game for his analysis? Okay, I think that's clear. We'll keep the agenda short and simple for April 5th. And if there's any other additional comments or questions, this meeting is adjourned at 2:45 on Monday, February 1st. And thank you for everybody's participation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks
Thanks.
all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.